Reaching the plain of Paestum, still today the vision of three colossal temple buildings, the Basilica, the Athenian, or better known as the Temple of Ceres, and the largest of them all, which is attributed to Neptune, somehow still arouse the same emotions felt by Johann Wolfgang on the 23rd of March 1767. Also, the geographer Straboni di Amosea reminds us about the city's Greek origins, whose name Poseidonia must have derived from a temple completely dedicated to Poseidon, which was built by a colony coming from Sibari on the land south of the river Sele. This first military outpost dates back to 600 BC, and subsequently the colonies overtook the entire land around the river, and where on the eastern banks rose the sanctuary of Hera Jiva, the god of fecundation. In its actual state, it is not possible to identify the monumental temple, but however the Archaeological Museum of Paestum still preserves a remarkable architectonic decoration, belonging to at least two distinguished sacred buildings built around 70 metope, which are sculptured from sandstone and datable between 570 and 550 BC. Mythical cycles relative to the undertaking of Heracles and up to the Trojan War prevail among iconic subjects, and of course not forgetting the portrayals of Centauromachia and Selenomachia. Owing to its artistic value and great emotional impact, this is one of the greatest sculptured complexes in all of the Greek archasm. A great tome for reading about the sanctuary of Hera, and also quite innovative, is also offered by the Naranti Museum, which was recently opened at the mouth of the river Sele. Reconstructed tridimensionally, films and special effects help to guide the visitors through the breathtaking experience of archaeological discoveries, while from its silence re-emerge the voices of those faithful ones who pleaded for the presence of a goddess by offering a small votive statue, which are shown here in a large number. The growth of the city's urban structure dates back only to the 6th century BC, the period which belongs to the definition agora, and also the building of great temples of a Doric nature. The Basilica was the first stone temple of a notable dimension to be carried out in the city. Dedicated to Hera, it presents 9 columns on its facade and 18 on its longer sides, and a cella, divided into 2 sections and preceded by symmetrical rooms. The architectonic decorations are ravishing and contain cornices and lion-headed waterspouts in bright polychrome. Situated on a mound in a dominating position is the so-called Temple of Ceres, the goddess of vegetation and messengers, and symbol of Mother Earth. Approaching the building, which is sought after for its elegance, from its Doric peristasi capitals to its Ionic columns, which take in and frame the large and bright vestibule cellar. Finally, one is struck by the well-kept state of the building, sacred to Neptune, where an impressive colonnade and cellar divide into 3 naves, and so continuing one of the most marvellous Doric architectures in the Western world during the time it was enlarged to its full extent. Towards the end of the 4th century BC, when it was occupied by the Lucanes, Posidonia went through a phase of new politics and social style. It was actually during this period that the magnificently painted tombs, which up until now postponed, can today be dated and are chronologically placed a few decades before 480 and 470 BC. Dives' tomb is an object of great value since its discovery in 1968, and there is still a lively discussion about the actual qualitative value of the pictorial decoration and also the significance of the scene representative. Could it be an excellent example of a Greek painting from the 5th century, or did it derive from previous pictorial models? The Archaeological Museum of Paestum, which stands inside the ancient city, holds an entire section dedicated only to painted slabs, coming from numerous tombs in the necropolis of Pestane. One of the most symbolic among all of them is tomb number 47, from the necropolis of Andriolo, situated outside the city's walls. Datable to around the middle of the 4th century BC, it tells, while following the pictures, a true and typical funeral sequence right up to the final scene, which contains a small triangle gable on the eastern slab. And here we can see the tiny corpse, like the archaeologist Angela Pontrandolfo described at the moment when he tries to climb into the fiery boat driven by a winged genius with a monstrous face, and who is trying to dock in the afterlife. Tomb number 10, coming from the necropolis of Laghetto, gives us instead a scene from everyday life. The picture of a matron, seated and intrigued in the Ianifacum, with her devoted maid next to her, holds out a basket of wool. The chromatic brightness and the simple spontaneity of this gesture makes it possible to confer to us the quiet and calm dimension of time, which transcends vanity to everything. During the Roman age, the city probably changed its name from Paestum to Paestum. Allied with Rome against Pirro, it became a Latin colony in 273 BC. This was another important phase in the urban transformation, clearly evidenced by the spectacular Roman Forum's monuments. An extension followed during the Imperial Age, when small spas were built in the areas around both the southern sanctuary and the amphitheatre. The latter was enlarged during the Flavian Age by means of adding an external ring, which was decorated by a series of arches resting on powerful brick pillars. When a recent road was built, it unfortunately covered a large part of the Summa Cavea, where the highest section of the tiers of seats were assigned to the ordinary public or lower class crowd, who were barred from entering the Imma Cavea with its elegant seats, found in the lower part and reserved for the most illustrious citizens and people of a very high social standard. But the clearest idea of imperial Paestum is given by some material exposed in the new rooms of the Roman section, and recently mounted in an exhibition on the first floor of the Archaeological Museum. Here one can admire the bronze statue of Marcia, once a slave but standing upright and free, like another symbol for freedom, which is acquired in the impressive portrait gallery on precious marble, where the official images of the Emperors Tiberia and Livia are portrayed, and the latter with his head veiled and dominated by a crown of olive leaves. The suburban sanctuary of Santa Venera holds a group of small statues dating back to around the middle of the 1st century BC, such as a seated Hermes, an Aphrodite's Anadiomen, and an Artemides Hercate. Also of particular interest is the statue of an important person wearing a toga, as well as a portrait of a woman's head with a typical and just as much eccentric curly hairstyle. Both of them date back to the Vespasian age. In fact, during the era around 71 AD, Paestum invited, on behalf of the imperial's wishes, a colony of veterans who were assigned the most important political assignments and which are today testified in a series of significant epigraphs. Therefore, such a suggestion is so typical in the case of Tully Cicerone, who boasted to be a presumed, but hardly believable, descendant to the famous Latin orator. The view from across the museum's exhibitions rooms ends with the last testimony from the late ancient age, which testifies that Paestum also followed the inevitable decline of the Roman Empire's crisis.